Part 48. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 491. Living people are everywhere, but in this place, people are very surprised. The fate of the girl in front of him was also very strange. Su Tong had never seen such a fate before. There was a little lion with golden hair and red scales coiled in the auspicious clouds. The shape was very festive. At a glance, she felt that the auspiciousness was overwhelming and precious. It would not be an exaggeration to say that she was a lucky star. The girl looked Su Tong up and down for a moment before shaking her head and saying, "I don't believe it." "Hey, don't believe it if you don't believe it. Who are you and why do you live in a place like this?" Su Tong asked the girl. He was sure that this girl was an ordinary person, but how could an ordinary person come here? Moreover, judging from her dress and behavior, she seemed to have lived here for a long time. When Su Tong asked about her origins, the girl shook her head in distress and said, "I don't know either. The king said that I am the reincarnation of a god. One day I will return to heaven, so he calls me the goddess of heaven." Hearing this, Meidu almost laughed out loud. What he said became more and more outrageous, and he couldn't help laughing and said, "There are no fairies now, how can there be gods?" Hearing Meidu's teasing, the goddess immediately became angry. "Humph, I knew you didn't believe it, so I ignored you." Seeing that the girl was about to leave, Su Tong pondered for a moment and then nodded, as if nothing was wrong and said, "No. I believe it." "I don't believe it, you must be coaxing me." Although the goddess was small, she was quirky. She stuck out her tongue at Su Tong, hugged the black cat and was about to leave. However, Su Tong's next words immediately stunned the goddess. "No, because I have seen gods." He turned around and looked at Su Tong curiously. "I not only met gods, I also went to heaven, and gods gave me a treasure." Su Tong talked confidently about how he once ate a Bilashan and went to Bilashan. While talking, he and Tiano walked forward along the corridor. He spoke so vividly that even the black cat in the goddess's arms couldn't help but raise its head, tilting its head and staring at Su Tong with a puzzled look in its eyes. As for Meidu, he was even more fascinated. At first, he thought it was his senior brother who made it up. But after Su Tong described in detail what he saw and heard in Bilashan, even Meidu doubted whether it was true. Could it be that senior brother has really been to Bilashan? What is Bilodan? It sounds familiar. Why can't I remember it for a moment? The three people and one cat walked to the courtyard and saw that there were banquets in the distance. The strangers who were following behind have already sat down according to their seniority. As for the two seats on the left and right of the first seat, only the high priest is sitting on one side, while the other side is empty. It is obviously prepared for Su Tong. In terms of seniority, he is Shuigui's disciple, and in terms of strength, he is the contemporary master. It seems that no one but him dares to sit in this position. From a distance, everyone saw Su Tong and three people walking towards each other talking and laughing. They couldn't help but look at each other and wondered where the little girl jumped out from. So many people. It was the first time Tiano saw such a scene. When she saw so many people suddenly appearing, she couldn't help but timidly took 2 steps back from Su Tong, then exposed her little head and watched carefully. Su Tong took Tiano to the seat and sat down. There were all kinds of strange things on the table. Although these fruits and foods looked very tempting, Su Tong thought it would be better not to eat them. After all, he had learned from the past. "In front of you." He casually took out a pack of biscuits from the prop book, opened it under the curious gaze of the goddess, and gave half of it to the goddess. Meow. Seeing the biscuits handed over by Su Tong, the black cat in Tiano's arms immediately became alert, showing its sharp claws and trying to pounce out of Tiano's arms. "Ew." The goddess hurriedly hugged the black cat tightly and said to Su Tong sheepishly, "Ew doesn't like people giving me food." Su Tong was not angry when he saw this, and looked at the black cat curiously. He took out a ham sausage from the prop book and tried to put it in front of the black cat. The black cat was instinctively wary of Su Tong, but when the alluring smell of the ham wafted over, the black cat couldn't help but lick its tongue, and cautiously reached out to take a bite. After just a small bite, the black cat fell in love with Su Tong's food guide, hugging the thick and big ham and started chewing it. The goddess also took the biscuit from Su Tong, put it to her mouth and took a bite. A smile suddenly appeared on her face. "It's so delicious. It's delicious. You can eat more. I still have it here." Su Tong took out 2 more packets of biscuits and gave them to Meidu, who was standing aside. At the same time, he asked about the 9 evil Ghost King. But the goddess didn't know much about the 9e underworld Ghost King. She only knew that this king adopted her, and other things about it, such as the origin of the 9e underworld Ghost King and why he wanted to capture people's souls. "Don't know anything." Seeing that no questions could be asked, Su Tong took out Gao Zhou's photo. "This is my friend. He should have arrived earlier than us. Have you seen them?" Tiano looked at the photo curiously. Strictly speaking, she stared at Su Tong's mobile phone curiously, as if she was still thinking about what this thing could be that could make a person look so real. However, after repeated confirmation, the goddess said with certainty that she had never seen Gao Zhou. She had been hiding behind the 9-pane wall and observing every stranger. If she had really seen Gao Zhou, she would definitely remember it correctly. Strangeness. Where did these 3 guys go? Su Tong couldn't help but murmur in his heart, and began to worry about Gao Zhou and Chang Wujia, or maybe he was worried about whether something happened to the old man. After all, these 3 people were grasshoppers on a rope. Just when Su Tong was worried about the safety of the 3 people, suddenly the sound of ritual music sounded all around. Accompanied by the sound of ritual music, a girl in a white silk skirt set up a screen in front of the main seat. Everyone could only vaguely see a vague outline appearing on the screen with the support of the maid's back. Seeing this, everyone couldn't help but look at each other. After finally going up the mountain, I didn't expect that. I didn't even see the true face of the Jui Ghost King. Fluorescence flashed in Su Tong's eyes, and he wanted to use the life icon to see who this Jui underworld king was. However, when he saw it, he was blocked by an invisible aura on the screen. It seems that this screen itself has a very strange effect. It can block the prying eyes of one's own life. A hand slowly stretched out from behind the screen. The dark nails were filled with black light, and the skin was covered with layers of pitch black scales, like sharp claws like monsters, which made many people present feel numb. He gently waved his palm towards the goddess twice. Seeing this, the goddess couldn't help but turn around and stick out her tongue at Su Tong. She stood up and ran behind the screen with the black cat in her arms. Only then did I hear a lazy questioning voice coming from behind the screen. "High Priest, I haven't seen you for a long time. The last time you came here, you said you would bring me 800 souls. Why do you only have these now?" The voice could not be identified as male or female, but the words instantly pointed all the fingers at the high priest. Now, when the strangers who followed up the mountain looked at the high priest, their eyes suddenly became unkind. They were forced to go into the cave together, and the market refused to save them. Now they discovered that they were treated as tributes like cattle and sheep by the high priest from the beginning. "Damn it, I knew you old bitch had bad intentions." One man fiercely pulled out the short knife from his waist, but before he could make a move, the young people standing behind the high priest had already raised the crossbow arrows in their hands. When the others saw this, their expressions changed slightly. Although they did not speak, they put their hands under the table silently. This is not an open terrain like Fangxi, and there are no ghosts chasing them. If they really fight, they may not have no chance of winning. The high priest wore a mask on her face, making it impossible to see what her expression was at this moment. She stretched out her hand and signaled the people behind her to put down their crossbows. "Your Majesty, the sacrifices are not theirs, they are just the guests I invited to participate in the divine sacrifice." As he said that, he saw the seedlings behind him and took out the red coffin he was carrying and placed it on the main hall. There are 1,000 souls in these coffins. In addition, there are many precious treasures. They are all tributes to the king. Please check them. After hearing this, the expressions on everyone's faces softened slightly. But the king behind the screen looked uninterested. "Forget it, what's so good about 1,000 living souls? It's no better now than it was back then. Every time you came to pay tribute, you paid at least 100,000 souls each time. Now this is not enough for me to squeeze between my teeth. I'll accept the things. But next time I want 3,000 living souls. If I can't collect them all, I will close Yin Yang Mountain, and your souls after they are born, just go to the underworld." Hearing this, several Shenmiao leaders suddenly became anxious. Yin Yang Mountain is the holy land of their voodoo sect, and it is the way for Shenmiao souls to return to nature. But ever since the 9 evil Ghost King took over this place, he has used this as a threat. They have to pay tribute every 44 years. Otherwise, it will directly block Yin Yang Mountain and even devour the souls of their people. To put it harshly, this is a bandit who dominates the mountain and blocks roads and robs. What, do you have any objections? The voice behind the screen suddenly became cold and stern, and even the surrounding temperature dropped a lot. The high priest was silent for a moment and then said, "Your Majesty, 3,000 is too much. Now that the barbarian kingdom is gone and all the chieftains have disappeared, and now the country promotes cremation, it won't be long before voodoo will disappear in the long river of history. 3,000 is too much. I'm not bargaining with you." The voice behind the screen suddenly became violent. Along with the angry sound, 2 dragon-shaped divine lights came out from behind the screen, as if a real dragon was born, and a huge sense of oppression rumbled over Su Tong's mind. Suddenly tensed up, and all the hairs on his body stood up, as if just a moment ago, he was about to be suppressed by the aura emanating from these 2 divine lights like everyone else. Fortunately, Su Tong seemed to have sensed the dangerous aura, and Su Tong's heart beat faster. A large amount of pure demonic energy surged out, covering his body and making his muscles relax again. As for other people, they didn't have the same ability as him. In the 2 dragon-shaped divine lights, there was an instant trembling feeling from the depths of the soul, and those low-level strangers immediately fell to the ground and couldn't move. Even the leaders of the seedlings fell to their knees on the ground at this moment, with large beads of sweat oozing from their foreheads. As for the high priest himself, he was the first to suffer. Under the annotation of 2 dragon-shaped divine lights, his body was unable to move for a moment. In a moment, blood beads dripped out from the gaps in the mask, dyeing the entire table red. The 2 dragon-shaped divine lights retracted behind the screen a moment later, followed by a strong sense of peeping, but an extra layer of black light appeared on Su Tong's body. In the black light, a black dog stood across Su Tong's body and blocked Su Tong's body. In front of children. This is the uncrowned king's passive skill of Black Biaojinbao. After activation, one's own aura will be hidden and cannot be captured by any tracking technique, cannot be calculated by ordinary arithmetic, and cannot be forcibly peeped by others. Hey! There is also Hey Biaos for protection. "Little guy, are you also a guest?" she invited. The figure behind the screen was a little surprised and looked at Su Tong. "No, I just came to retrieve the soul of a relative and friend who was taken away by the king." Su Tong stared at the screen and directly stated his purpose. "Oh, who is it?" The voices behind the screen softened. "Jiaxiao Mountain." Fortunately, I had asked Mr. Gao his name before, otherwise I really couldn't tell him his name. But when Su Tong said the name, there was a sudden silence behind the screen. "Gao Xiaoshan. Are you his descendant?" When Su Tong heard something was wrong in the tone behind the screen, he suddenly became alert. He put one hand under the table and patted Meidu beside him, who had just recovered from the pressure, to signal him to be careful. But he still pretended to be ignorant and said, "Yes, he is a senior of my family. Because he lacks a soul, he is not allowed to enter reincarnation, so I came here to look for him." Ha 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 ha! There was a loud laugh from behind the screen, and then the laughter suddenly stopped. "What if I don't give it to you?" Su Tong looked slightly cold, stood up slowly, crossed his hands on his chest, and said sternly, "If the king doesn't give it to you, I will get it myself." There was silence all around. No one expected Su Tong to be so strong. For a moment, those strangers in the world clapped their hands and applauded secretly, for fear that Su Tong would not take action. As long as Su Tong takes action, they can take back their souls together if they win. If they lose, the situation will not be any worse, so I wish Su Tong could quickly compete with the Zhu'er Ghost King now. The high priest and other Shen Miao leaders on the side couldn't help but look at Su Tong, their eyes full of surprise. In their eyes, Su Tong's behavior was no different from seeking death. King Zhu Yimingui was not just a small demon king. It would be an exaggeration to say that he was a god. Otherwise, why would they still swallow their anger after so many years of voodoo practice? Hey hey hey! There was a burst of laughter from behind the screen, as if he didn't take Su Tong's threat to heart. "It's interesting, I'll give you a chance." At this point, the voice paused, and then he changed his words. "I'm giving you a chance. There is a river behind Yin Yang Mountain, called the River of Rebirth. The river connects Yin Yang. There are countless ghosts under the water. There is a high tower at the end of the river. As long as you can climb the tower, I will send you to Jiaxiao Mountain. My soul will be returned to you, and your other demands can also be met." This sentence is not only aimed at Su Tong, but also for everyone, especially those who have grown seedlings. If they can complete it, their next tribute will be exempted. "I am injured, so I will not participate. I will collect 3,000 souls for the next divine sacrifice." Surprisingly, the high priest did not intend to try this opportunity, which made the leaders behind him feel a little resentful. As for other aliens, "Can we also contribute our souls to the king in exchange for our souls?" someone suddenly asked. There are very few living souls in the country, and even if there are, they don't dare to catch them. This kind of thing involves great cause and effect, and may even be suspected of disturbing yin and yang. If they are discovered by the yin and yang below, they will be finished. But, it's not possible at home, but it's possible abroad. There are so many living souls in the United States, Chechnya, the Middle East, India, and other places. Yes, you can exchange it for 3,000 souls. If there are more than enough, I can give you more treasures, and even help you break through the shackles. It is not difficult to become a Grand Master. The voice behind the screen suddenly became gentle. He didn't care who the living soul belonged to or how it came about, as long as it was a living soul. After receiving the reply, these strangers immediately breathed a sigh of relief, and some even couldn't hold back the joy in their eyes. This is not only a way to get back the living soul, but also helps them break through to the Grand Master. This is a great opportunity, so they all expressed their willingness to sacrifice the living soul next time. Actually, you can do it too. 3,000 souls are not a lot. The voice behind the screen turned to Su Tong. "No, I don't have the time or the inclination, so I'll just do as you say." Su Tong put down his hands. It was still unknown whether he could live for 44 years. What's more, the old man of the Gao family did not have the time to wait. Even if the old man's soul was preserved by the Gao family using special methods, the soul would still be damaged if it lasted too long. Damage. Since you are so confident, let's make it more difficult for you. Suddenly the goddess's scream came from behind the screen, "No." Immediately afterwards, The cat's scream was heard, and the black cat held in the arms of the goddess was thrown out, and Su Tong reached out to catch it. "Take this cat with you on the road. Either live together or die together." "No, your majesty." The goddess wanted to chase her out, but was pulled back by the big hand. Through the screen, she could only hear the sobbing of the goddess. When Su Tong saw this, he put the trembling black cat in his arms and was about to go to the back mountain. But he heard brisk footsteps outside the door. "Wait, there are still us." Everyone followed the sound and saw two people rushing in carrying a red coffin. It was Gao Zhou and Chang Liuzhu who had been missing before. "I wanted to finish writing and write it out in one breath, but my eyes feel uncomfortable and I don't know where I dropped the eye drops. I can only write a larger chapter today." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 492. These two guys seemed to have disappeared since Su Tong went up the mountain, but they rushed out at this moment, which surprised everyone. However, seeing only the two of them but no sign of the old man, Su Tong's heart skipped a beat, knowing that something must have happened. "We are willing to try together. We only want one thing from your majesty." Gao Zhou and Chang Liuzhu ignored Su Tong and came forward to bow down to the screen. "What? Deed of the Ghost King." Gao Zhou took a deep breath and read out these 4 words. Everyone looked at each other for a moment. No one knew what this thing was, even Su Tong heard of it for the first time. "Hi, what do they want with this thing?" On the side, Meidu couldn't help but drag his chin and muttered to himself with confusion on his face. "Do you know this thing?" Su Tong held the black cat in his arms with one hand. The guy seemed to be calm after something happened, and he lay obediently on Su Tong's chest without moving. Meidu nodded. "I have this thing at home, and there are many related classics. It is written very clearly on it. Those who enter the underworld must not go through the 5 gates and cannot pass without a contract. Those who enter without permission will have their souls plunged into the underworld and never recover." Meidu explained to Su Tong in a low voice that the underworld was not as small as people thought. On the contrary, it was very big. The exact size is unknown, but it is indeed very huge. Such a large place is managed by countless ghosts, and even some ghosts and fairies. But in such a big place, you can't just come and go when you want. If there is no deed, once discovered, it will inevitably lead to an underhanded arrest, so a deed is needed as a guarantee. To put it bluntly, this thing is similar to the ancient road guide. Without this thing, you will be treated as a fugitive. When Meidu said this, Su Tong understood that this thing was similar to the deed in his master's hand, but it seemed that the deed in his master's hand was more advanced. It's just that not everyone can take out this thing. Although the Ghost King sounds like a Ghost King, he is not a priest of the underworld. How can he take out this thing? Meidu held his chin in his hand and was thinking about it. Su Tong was also thinking about it, but his thinking direction was different from Meidu's. How could Gao Zhou know about this thing? Why would he want this thing even if he spared his old man's soul? The person behind the screen was silent for a while and then said, "Okay. This thing is not difficult at all. It's getting late. You should hurry up and don't delay the time for everyone to go back." From behind the screen, a woman came out. It was the woman at the bottom of the mountain before. She opened her hand and made a gesture of invitation, "Please come with me." Su Tong stood up when he saw this, while Meidu pulled him and whispered, "Be careful of fraud." Su Tong calmly pushed Meidu's hand back, "Keep this thing. If something goes wrong, run away." It turned out that Meidu wanted to secretly hand him a plum blossom hairpin, but Su Tong didn't accept it. He always felt that something was wrong, and Meidu needed this thing to save his life even more if he stayed here. After speaking, he patted Meidu's arm and followed the woman out of the hall. Gao Zhou and Chang Luogu carried the coffin again and followed. Seeing this, the others stood up one after another, wanting to see whether Su Tong and the others could succeed. The three of them walked down the mountain along the path at the back of the mountain. In front of Yin Yang Mountain was a scalding hot spring, but behind it was a biting cold wind. Moreover, it becomes more and more bone-chilling as you go down. Su Tong himself is very strong, and he also has the item card Black Biao brocade robe that is immune to the cold of water, fire, and ice, so it is quite easy. Because of Gao Zhou's transformation into a corpse, the coldness felt very comfortable to him and did not affect him at all. Only Chang Wuhan's face turned pale and his body shivered from time to time. It can be seen that although Chang Wuhan has also become a player, his strength seems to be a little bit behind. It's just that Chang Wuhan is still like this, let alone those strangers who wanted to follow down and take a look. After walking for more than 10 meters, they could no longer bear the cold air below and turned back to the top of the mountain. One is cold and the other is hot. There is really a difference between yin and yang. Some people were secretly surprised that there was such a strange place in the world. Su Tong slowed down and waited for Gao Zhou and the two who were following him to approach, then turned back and glared at them. Idiot, where's the master? The old man's life was related to their survival. At this moment, the old man was not seen. How could Su Tong not ask? Gao Zhou and Chang Wuju looked strange, as if they wanted to say something, but they didn't know how to explain when they opened their mouths. They could only look helplessly at the coffin beside them and said with aggrieved expressions, "Elder brother, master was captured by monsters." It turned out that they noticed something was wrong in Fangxi and wanted to throw the old man into the coffin. Who knew that when the coffin was opened, there would be a zombie hidden inside, and they directly dragged the old man in. Fortunately, the zombies didn't eat the old man alive, otherwise the two of them would have been buried with him. But the bad news is that this zombie actually threatened the old man, forcing the two of them to listen to him. Two unlucky guys. Su Tong didn't know what to say for a moment. He could only say that they were both really unlucky. This kind of thing could happen to them, but where did this zombie come from? It couldn't be that the old man put a zombie in there by himself. They should be coming from behind. Do you remember the coffin we saw when we just swam across the underground river? Gao Zhou lowered his head and spoke in a softer voice. Chang Wuhan, who was standing by, was already eager to pick up a screwdriver and poke a few holes in this guy's body. In the final analysis, Gao Zhou was still cheap and knocked on other people's coffins when he had nothing to do. Now it's better. He is using takeaways to persuade the princes, which makes them even more passive now. Boom. Su Tong tried to knock on the coffin. Master, as long as the queen is with you, you can be the consort in there with peace of mind. Save, save. The coffin shook a few times, but soon there was no movement. Then a small gap was opened slightly in the coffin, and Su Tong could feel someone looking at him in the gap. Bang. Then the coffin was closed tightly, and there was no more movement. Seeing that the zombie in the coffin didn't respond, Su Tong had no choice but to ignore him for the time being. When he followed the woman to the bottom of the cliff, the air here became even colder. Even taking a breath felt like stuffing a ball of ice into his mouth, which made his teeth ache from the cold. The woman pointed towards the northwest and followed her hand, but it was completely dark and she couldn't see anything. Not far away, about 3,000 meters, you can see a high tower. As long as you climb the high tower and light the glazed lamp on the high tower, your wishes will come true. The king will be watching from above. You. Su Tong raised his head and took a look, only to see a small pavilion next to the cliff. The pavilion was surrounded by white screens, and the situation inside could not be seen at all. The high priest and other Miao clan leaders also stood on one side, watching them silently. But the time is limited, you only have half an hour. The woman then pointed to a small boat on the shore and reminded Su Tong that they could swim there in the small boat. No, it's not ready-made. Su Tong patted the coffin in Chang Wogu's hand, waved his hand, and threw the coffin into the water. The three of them jumped on the coffin. Meidu stood far away on the mountainside, waving at them and shouting to them to be careful. It's not that he doesn't want to come down, it's just that it's too cold down there. Being able to go down halfway up the mountain is already the limit of what Meidu can go down. Su Tong waved towards Meidu, and the three of them sat on the coffin and rowed towards the depths of the water. Within a moment, the shadows of the three people disappeared into the black mist. Looking at the disappearing figure, the high priest lowered his head, stretched out his hand and took out a bottle from his sleeve. After the bottle was opened, a pungent smell filled the air. She reached out and took off the mask on her face, revealing her true face. At this time, everyone discovered that the high priest was already an old lady with frosty white hair. She seemed to be in her 70s. She had just been injured by the two divine lights of Jui Ghost King, and her face was still a little pale. Meidu had just climbed up from the bottom of the mountain when he suddenly saw the high priest taking off his mask, and an ominous premonition suddenly filled his heart. He was not from Xiangzi, but as a descendant of Maihua village, Meidu knew very well that the high priests of the Voodoo sect never showed their true colors to others. Except for the insiders of the Voodoo sect, almost no one knew their true identities. At this moment, the high priest took off his mask in front of everyone. This move was too abnormal. Thinking of this, Meidu took a few steps back and quietly hid his figure in an inconspicuous corner. At the same time, on the other side, Su Tong and three others were sitting on the coffin. The three of them were skiing on the water with their hands. The speed was not slow at all, but the deeper they went, the colder it became. Chang Wuxia couldn't help complaining, "It's all your fault. Why did you take pictures of someone else's coffin lid? I'm happy with it. You don't care about me. Don't think you are the leader's brother. If you make me anxious, you will be finished if you don't see if I can handle it." Gao Zhubai was still unhappy with Chang Wuhan, thinking that if this cheater had not come here, maybe the old man wouldn't be able to trick him. Chang Wuhan didn't say anything, his eyes showed murderous intent. He wished he could pounce on Gao Zhou right now and cut Gao Zhou into pieces. "Stop arguing and paddle quickly. If you want to argue, wait until the glass lantern is lit." Su Tong turned around and glared at the two of them, only to see that the black cat was stuffed into his clothes, with only its furry little head sticking out of the collar, and its eyes curiously looking at the surrounding water. However, at this moment, a hoarse laughter suddenly came from inside the coffin. "Why are you laughing?" When Gao Zhou heard the laughter, he patted the coffin and said, "You have a corpse. What do you want from the Ghost King's deed? If you want to travel to the underworld, my boss can send you down, guaranteed to be quick and safe." Faced with Gao Zhou's complaints, the laughter in the coffin became even more harsh. "Don't rush to complain, I'm not harming you, I'm saving you. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 493. Save us. Gao Zhou pouted, "Then release my master. This old thing is old and smelly, and I'm too lazy to chew it, but if I throw him out now, are you sure he can still be alive?" "Now Gao Zhou, shut up. It's freezing cold here, it's freezing cold. Just look at Chang Wu, who is as cold as a dog and his teeth are trembling all the time. You can tell that if he really lets the old man out, he might burp right away. What do you mean by saving us?" Su Tong frowned and asked. He felt that the zombie in the coffin was not simple. Could it be that there was something else hidden? The zombie in the coffin did not answer Su Tong, but said coldly, "I think you should survive first. Listen, something is coming." Suddenly there was a crashing sound on the dead water. There were blood-red lightning bolts as thick as a water tank, and large turbid waves beat fiercely against the rocks. The entire water surface suddenly became turbid and yellow. When the waves surged, hundreds of black lumps could be seen in the water rushing toward the three of them. It's a White Walker. Su Tong had dark vision and could clearly see the black figures emerging from the water from a distance. They bared their teeth and claws, opened their bloody mouths, and rushed towards them with twisted tentacles. These ghosts are completely different from the ghosts under the Nine Evil King. Their scarlet eyes reveal primitive madness and wildness, and their minds only have killing and destruction. They are the most primitive creatures in the yin and yang Dao. They are dark and cold-blooded and have no independent thinking ability at all. So much. Seeing the terrifying number of black people on the water, Gaozhou and Chang Wugu were immediately startled. They had seen those strange ghosts before, but this was the first time they saw such a large number. Unavoidably, their hearts began to rise. Murmur. Not to mention the fighting power of these White Walkers, just the number of them rushing towards them was enough to break the coffin under them. You protect the coffin and leave the rest to me. Su Tong also knew that he couldn't let these strange ghosts rush over. He took out the black cat in his arms and threw it to Gaozhou. Then his breath filled the air, making the scene even more chaotic. Jump straight into the water. Su Tong sank into the water and fell rapidly, then raised a large series of bubbles. In the darkness, a black shadow under the water could be seen rushing towards him quickly. Su Tong reached out and grabbed the nearest White Walker without even thinking about it. This White Walker looks a bit strange, with a huge humanoid head, but its neck is covered with tentacles and has no body at all. The huge tentacles are like propellers, rolling up an undercurrent under the water at extremely fast speeds. It originally wanted to rush up from under the coffin and push the coffin up, but it didn't expect that a human would suddenly jump into the water. Just when it was about to monopolize this flesh and blood with joy, it didn't expect that rolling demonic energy suddenly surged out of Su Tong's body. A terrifying demonic aura emerged around Su Tong, and a terrifying aura made him involuntarily feel fear deep in his heart. This is the special passive effect brought by Lilith's heart, Demon Blood. Demonic Bloodline LV1, all dark skills are upgraded by 1 level and have bloodline suppression. Low-level demons will naturally fear you, and as long as you are strong enough, the demons will also become your slaves. Strictly speaking, these strange ghosts were almost the same as those demons. They were naturally afraid of the aura on Su Tong's body. Their bodies stiffened and they did not dare to resist for a moment, allowing Su Tong to grab his hair and step on his head. Superior. However, the benefits of demonic blood go beyond that. With demonic blood, Su Tong can even hear the voice conveyed in the screams and neighs of this strange ghost. Don't kill me, don't kill me. Surrender or die. Su Tong can't speak the words of the White Walker, but don't forget that there is a pure White Walker in the hall behind him. I saw Fasai flying out from the entrance of the hall and landing on Su Tong's shoulders. His round body was emitting golden light. It was only as big as a palm and looked like a meatball. It opened its mouth and let out a sharp roar. Acted as translator for Su Tong. Now the ghost at Su Tong's feet was even more frightened, trembling to express his willingness to surrender. Rush. Su Tong stamped his feet, and the White Walkers twisted their octopus-like tentacles and swam forward quickly. Fa Cai twisted his body and looked particularly excited, especially when he saw his kind appearing among the White Walkers in front of him. He kept gasping and gasping, I want to eat. Since the last time the fortune level was directly knocked down in order to restrain Taoist Sun Long, Su Tong could feed it incense and merit, but the incense and merit could only improve its quality but not upgrade. If you want to upgrade, the fastest and best way is to let it devour its own kind. Su Tong has been unable to find suitable things to feed him. Now that food is being delivered to him, Su Tong is no longer welcome. I saw an extra doll in Su Tong's hand. When he patted the doll on the head, a sharp and strange laughter came out of the doll's mouth. The laughter was harsh and had a very unflattering feeling. Even Su Tong himself would have an inexplicable urge to gag the baby after hearing it. Mocking doll. Active Skill 1, what are you looking at? After consuming 10 script points after activation, the doll will center on itself and emit taunting sound waves, causing surrounding enemies to unknowingly attract attention to itself. Note, if this had been left in the hands of northern gentlemen, they would have dismantled it long ago. I bought this thing from an exhibition a long time ago, but I never had the right opportunity. Today is the first time I have used it, but the effect is surprisingly good. The strange ghosts suddenly changed their direction and rushed towards Su Tong. Hey, renter, come out to work. In an instant, the Dark Lord was activated, and an exaggerated scream sounded in Su Tong's ears. It was the voice of the Dark Lord Amrita. Did you break into the Yin and Yang Dao? Amrita was also shocked by the number of White Walkers in front of him, but soon he took a look at Su Tong's breath and his voice immediately relaxed. Fortunately, they are not, they are all low-level little guys. As he spoke, magic smoke rose from Su Tong's body, and silver streaks rose up on his skin. As Su Tong raised his palm, the dark red hellfire instantly illuminated the dark river in front of him. With the power of the devil and the blessing of the devil's blood, the aura spread everywhere, causing the White Walkers rushing in front to panic. The White Walkers rushing in front mostly wanted to hide away, but the White Walkers behind them still rushed forward regardless. As a result, the two collided together, and the scene suddenly became chaotic. Su Tong didn't care about this, he stepped on the White Walkers under his feet and went straight in. The hellfire waved in his hand, like a fire dragon exploding among the ghosts, and every spark ignited when it touched it. For these ghosts, the fire of hell was their nemesis, and in an instant, the entire water surface began to glow. Red light. Hey. It's interesting. The red light flashing on the water in the distance became bigger and bigger, and even the 9E Underworld Ghost King in the pavilion couldn't help but make a sound of surprise. No one knew what was happening, but they could see a large red light flashing in the black screen in the distance. There are more interesting things. At this time, the High Priest took off his mask and walked to the pavilion. Your Majesty. The High Priest's hands were slightly lowered. It seemed that it was because of the bottle of potion just now. The color on her face had recovered a lot at this moment. Your Majesty, after 44 years, we will pay tribute to 3,000 souls as your Majesty wishes, but, during this period, can your Majesty be accommodating and allow a few elders of our clan to pass through Yin Yang Mountain? After a while of silence in the pavilion, he said impatiently, according to the rules, 7 go and 1 is left. It's another thing to make a confession. Old lady, do you still want to negotiate terms with me for something like this? The High Priest lowered his head so that no one could see her expression. I didn't do it in the past, but not this time. Everyone around was still looking at the red light in the distance, and no one noticed the movement here. There was only one person staring here intently, and that was Meidu. Not only staring, but also listening with open ears. The more I listened, the faster my heart beat. I thought, are these old ladies crazy? Are you going to stand up to the 9E Underworld Ghost King like this? But then I thought, no, these old ladies are not that stupid. From the time Feng Lilu sent masters into Xiangzi to assassinate Su Tong, Feng Lilu's 4 masters disappeared from the world, forcing Feng Lilu to issue a wanted order, and a large number of strangers entered Xiangzi. However, a murder occurred directly on the street, and everyone was beaten. People are caught off guard. At this time, someone began to introduce them to participate in the so-called divine sacrifice. From this moment on, Meidu suspected that everything was done by voodoo. Because looking at Xiangzi, only the voodoo sect has such great ability, dares to kill, and can kill the masters of Feng Lilu. In other words, they were treated as pawns by the High Priest from the beginning and brought to this place. So what did the High Priest want to do? Meidu couldn't guess it, but judging from the attitude of the High Priest, this was definitely not a good sign. Thinking of this, Maydew couldn't help but take out 3 plum blossom hairpins and hold them in his hand. "What did you say?" There was an angry sound in the pavilion, followed by the sound of something breaking. Everyone was startled and looked back. They saw the high priest kneeling on the ground, with a cup of tea poured on his face. There was a smashed teacup on the ground. They saw blood dripping down the high priest's forehead, leaving everyone at a loss. The voice in the pavilion was like thunder, "You old man, you are so brave. I have already opened the voodoo net for you, but you still dare to push it even further." The high priest lowered his head and looked at the blood drops dripping on the ground, and then continued, "Please grant me your permission, your majesty. There are a total of 367 old people in our clan, and not one of them should be missing." For an instant, the place fell into a deathly silence, and everyone even held their breath involuntarily, staring at the high priest in stunned silence. The Shenmiao clan leaders were already trembling and kneeling on the ground, preparing to face the wrath of this god. He, I haven't seen such a high priest with such backbone for a long time." Along with laughter, 2 maids walked out of the pavilion, one on the left and one on the right, moving away the screen that blocked everyone. Everyone looked towards the pavilion with wide eyes, wanting to see the true god. I saw white silk floating around the pavilion, revealing a body covered with dragon scales, and a stern face looming among the floating white silk. "Old guy, tell me, if I don't agree, what are you going to do to appease my anger?" The cold eyes peered through the gaps in the white silk, making people shudder. However, what shocked everyone was that the high priest slowly stood up from the ground, holding the crutch in front of him with one hand, silently grabbing the other end of the crutch with the other hand, and pulling the crutch with both hands. Click, it gradually cracked open, revealing a dark red blade. "If your majesty doesn't agree, there is only one way I can calm the anger of the king. Kill the god." Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 494. Crash. The water waves hit the coffin, and the waves raised up turned Gao Zhou and Chang Liuju into drowned rats. But the 2 of them didn't feel cold. Instead, they felt hot all over. The dim yellow sea water in front of you is burning into a red at this moment. This is the strength of the authenticated player. Once you rise, the situation changes, you raise your hands and feet, and you swallow the mountains and rivers with anger. Both of them were filled with excitement. Even though Su Tong had not yet truly become a certified player, it was not an exaggeration to think that he could consider himself a certified player with such strength. This guy. Chang Liuji's heart was burning, but his eyes were flickering. He put one hand unconsciously into the satchel on his waist and rubbed his fingers back and forth. Crash. Su Tong stuck his head out from the water and stretched out an arm. At this time, Gao Zhou and Chang Wuhan instinctively extended their hands together, but their 3 hands were in the air for a moment. Seeing this, Gao Zhou and Chang Wuhan couldn't help but look at each other. Chang Wuhan frowned and subconsciously wanted to take his hand back, but at this time Su Tong's other hand stretched out from the water and grabbed his wrist. Grabbing one with each hand, he jumped onto the coffin and took a deep breath. Then he didn't say anything, took out food from the prop book and stuffed it into his mouth. Although Amarda's power is easy to use, it is not his own power after all. Even though Amarda no longer consumes his own flesh and blood, this guy wants to suck the demonic energy from his own body. Lilith's heart was beating rapidly, and the demonic energy was naturally flowing continuously, but it was also a great test for her physical strength. Even though it was fun to kill on the water, after Amarda had eaten and drank enough and returned, he was almost exhausted to the point of collapse. In the final analysis, it is best to use your own abilities. Su Tong sighed and glanced at the entrance of the hall. At the entrance of the hall, Fa Cai was almost crazy with joy, jumping around the fairy furnace. Just listen to a banging sound in the fairy furnace. A steady stream of faint yellow pills rolled out of it. There are many corpses of white walkers on the side, which basically look similar to those of fortune. Although these white walkers have physical bodies, in essence, they are still within the scope of the soul body. If they are thrown into the fairy furnace, they will be transformed immediately. Pills. Dia and Jixiang looked at it with envy, but they didn't dare to try it. After all, strange ghosts are strange ghosts. They are the things that are transformed after the filthy air in the yin and yang dao merges with the ray of yang breath in the world. To them fairies, this kind of thing is no less than a human croton. You are so excited, 2 pills will make your legs weak, 3 pills will make you cry for father and mother. Boom, boom, boom. After eating, I felt that my physical strength had recovered a lot. I took the black cat from Gao Zhou's hand. The little guy seemed to be unable to get any warmth in Gao Zhou's cold clothes. Once Su Tong took it over, he immediately get into Su Tong's arms. Head. Right in front. Gao Zhou pointed forward, and the 3 of them looked and saw a strange tall tower on the water. This high tower is not built on a reef or island, but is like a sea-fixing needle inserted diagonally in the water. Su Tong knocked on the coffin. Hey, we're almost there. You haven't finished what you just said. There was silence in the coffin. At this moment, the black cat ears in Su Tong's arms moved slightly and looked behind him. Boom. Then a buzzing sound came from Yin Yang Mountain behind the 3 people. The sound was not loud, but the soul-stirring murderous aura made the 3 people's faces suddenly become solemn. He, I finally couldn't bear it anymore. A low laugh erupted from the coffin. What do you mean? Gao Zhou felt the fierce murderous aura becoming more and more surging. He couldn't help but be shocked at the source of this murderous aura. As he looked, he saw a bright green light on Yin Yang Mountain in the distance, which seemed like a gem in the night sky. Same, dazzling. The voice in the coffin became more and more excited, but he was deliberately showing off. If you want to know, let's continue walking up the tower. Let's talk as we go. We don't have much time, so you have to hurry up. Walk. Su Tong didn't waste any time and jumped onto the tower first, followed by Gao Zhou and Chang Wuhen. The 2 of them lifted the coffin out of the water, and the water-stained box was immediately covered with a layer of frost. Chang Wuhen trembled all over, his face getting worse and worse. The temperature in the tower was much lower than they imagined. Seeing this, Su Tong took out the black brocade robe and put it on Chang Wugu. Feeling the long-lost warmth, Chang couldn't help but take a deep breath. His face gradually turned rosy, but looking at the black brocade robe on his body, he ignored Su Tong. Don't think that I won't kill you. Hey. Su Tong pouted, reached out and pinched this guy's face. I just like the way you want to kill me but can't. After saying that, he ignored Chang Wuhen's gritted teeth and patted the coffin behind him. Hey, if you don't say anything else, I won't be interested in listening. Say, let's talk about it, but I can only keep it short. After all, it's been too long. Even if I tell you, you may not be interested. Simply put, the king of the 9E underworld ghost may not be that little bitch from the voodoo cult. Opponent. Impossible. Gao Zhou turned around and decisively denied what he said. Didn't you say that the Jui underworld ghost king is very powerful? He has a big backer in the underworld behind him, and he is a righteous god with a divine status. Just rely on that high priest? Can you? If you kill him, isn't this asking for your own death? On the way up the mountain, the zombie in the coffin told the 2 of them not to attend the banquet, but to hide outside and watch what happened. At the same time, he also told them many unknown things. For example, the origin of the Jui underworld ghost king is not only that he has the status of a righteous god, but also must have a backer in the underworld. Moreover, he is not an ordinary backer, at least a god with the level of a great god, so he dares to be so unscrupulous. Here the earth imprisoned the living soul and established itself as king. In comparison, even though the Grand Master is strong, he is still a mortal, So how can he kill a god? Facing Gao Zhou's doubts, Coffin just urged calmly, keep walking, don't stop, let's talk as we walk. Seeing this, Su Tong nodded towards Gao Zhou and signaled to continue walking up. Ding! Cold Iron Gourd's passive skill Cold Heart and Hot Body is activated, and energy is being replenished. Passive skill 1, Chilling Heart and Warming Body. The holder can absorb ice damage and convert it into energy. When the energy overflows, it will be temporarily converted into an ice shield. The temperature of the tower is extremely cold, but it has reached the critical point for activating the Ice Gourd's passive skill. It can absorb the surrounding cold air to replenish the gourd's energy. This is an unexpected surprise. The voice in the coffin continued to speak lazily, it's impossible at other times, but today is an exception. Every 44 years, the Jui Ghost King will have a period of decline. The so-called divine sacrifice actually means that he needs a lot of living souls to replenish his declining body, so killing him at this time is the best opportunity. If this is really the case, why did the voodoo cult wait until today to take action? Su Tong asked as he walked behind the coffin. The voodoo sect was once considered a great sect, with many masters in the section. If it were so simple, could it make people strangle their necks for hundreds of years? It can only be said that this guy disguised himself too well. In addition, so many people failed to kill him back then. It has long left a shadow in the hearts of those young people. It was only during the last 2 divine sacrifices that anyone noticed the clues. But the conditions were not met at the time, and they did not dare to take action rashly. This time, they came prepared first. From the moment those people came in, I smelled the smell of medicine on these guys. It was the witch medicine of the Miao people. When these people came in, they didn't have to think about going back alive. They would inevitably be used as sacrifices later. How do you know these things? Gao Zhou turned around and asked. He had never had time to ask about this guy's origins, and now he just wanted to ask them all. Humph. I just know it. I have been buried here longer than your ancestors. I know these things clearly. When Gao Zhou heard this, his face darkened, and he cursed in his heart, damn it, if one of my ancestors could make you so crazy. But soon Gao Zhou frowned and became troubled. So, King Jui Mingui is dead, so why should we go up? Let's go back quickly. Don't worry, the Ghost King has been on guard for a long time. That old woman can't kill him. Let's go up and light the lamp, then go back and ask for the reward from the Ghost King Jui. We can avoid the center of chaos and get answers at the same time. Some reward, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. The voice in the coffin spoke disapprovingly of his own little plan. When Su Tong heard this, he thought for a moment, you are, Wang Zhao. Bang. Hearing the word Wang Zhao, there was a clanging sound in the coffin, and then the voice in the coffin became urgent, who are you, and how do you know my name? Your good friend Macy Yuan wrote down all your crimes. I happened to read it. You just mentioned the war. I think it was the war in the 28th year of Jiajing. Su Tong remembered that Macy Yuan's booklet mentioned that he and Wang Zhao were both trapped here, and it seemed that Macy Yuan did not kill Wang Zhao from beginning to end. Coupled with Wang Zhao's words, Su Tong naturally thought of Wang Zhao. That's nonsense, you bastard. I didn't harm him. I was wronged. There was a loud bang in the coffin, and Wang Zhao could be heard yelling, the one who betrayed them was the bastard of the Zhang family, the ancestor of this old man's family. If their family hadn't been greedy for the treasure given by King Jui Mingui, they would have brought them with them. If we take the wrong path, even if we can't kill this old ghost, we can still break his 3 legs and let him go back to the underworld. Su Tong mentally compared the contents on the scroll left by Macy Yuan, but he didn't quite believe Wang Zhao's words. He felt that this guy was talking nonsense, but in comparison, he believed what was written on Macy Yuan's leather scroll. Just when he was about to ask what happened, a green light suddenly burst out in the distance, and dots of fluorescent light flew into the sky, illuminating the entire Yin-Yang mountain. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 495. This crazy bitch. Crazy. On Yin-Yang mountain, everyone was horrified. Fluorescence rose before their eyes and split into water droplets, flames, air masses, and soil in the air, forming a terrifying storm. In the midst of the storm, an old woman stood in front of her holding a long knife. The sword made a faint sound, and murderous intent shot straight into the sky. Who would have thought that this high priest turned out to be a great master? There was no sign of her showing up all the way, and it was only then that she suddenly started to attack. But even so, no one thinks highly of her. The Grand Master is just a person, an ordinary mortal, but the person she faces is the terrifying god in the pavilion. These are not two concepts at all. What else can be compared? I saw a strong wind blowing around the pavilion, but it could not lift the white silk around the pavilion. Everyone could only see the burly figure through the gap, wearing armor like dragon scales, standing tall and motionless, like Mount Tai. Facing the high priest who actually challenged him, his stern eyes were neither happy nor sad. His indifferent gaze was like an adult watching a child's prank. He understood everything at a glance. There was no anger, only boredom. The Ghost King said calmly, "It's very good, but it's not enough." These 5 understated words seemed to have sealed the farce in front of him. Everyone shook their heads, thinking that the high priest had lost his mind and was crazy. It was so good, why couldn't he think about it? If it's not enough, human lives will make up for it. The high priest raised her head and her eyes gradually became sharp. The faces of the Miao leaders following her changed, as if they realized something, and turned around to run away. But how could things that had been decided long ago go away? The high priest lifted up the ceremonial dress around his waist, revealing a small leather drum, and tapped the drum head with his fingers. Bang bang bang. The high priest obviously knocked once, but the small leather drum kept sounding. As soon as the Miao leaders heard the sound of the drums, they immediately collapsed on the ground. Then they saw their abdomens suddenly swelled, as if something was wriggling inside. This scene undoubtedly made everyone's scalp numb. It is said that the technique practiced by voodoo is called witchcraft, and it is more terrifying than the heresy. Now that I saw it in front of me, I realized that it was simply evil. Puff. Immediately, blood spattered and everyone saw several toads covered with black spots emerging from the abdomens of these seedling leaders. What was even more disgusting was that these toads flew on the high priest's body and made croaking sounds. Then with a bang, the toad exploded, turning into black blood and flying into the high priest's mouth and nose. Nausea. Some people shook their heads secretly, and some people started to gag. Meidu frowned for a moment. Although he was disgusted in his heart, he knew that witchcraft had been bloody since ancient times, and blood sacrifices were popular. Long before Taoism became popular, the Yin and Shang dynasties, when witchcraft was prosperous, all used human sacrifices. As for human sacrifice, institutions, overtly or covertly, run through the entire ancient history. At this time, some people began to scratch themselves unconsciously. At first, it was only the arms and neck that itched, but soon they felt that the whole body was getting more and more itchy. "Hey, why are you so itchy?" The scratching became more and more itchy, and almost no one was spared. Gradually, everyone finally realized that something was wrong, but by the time they realized it, it was already too late. I saw the high priest waving the Miao knife in his hand. As the blade was swung, blood beads flew out from everyone's wounds and appeared behind the high priest. The method of blood sacrifice, ancient witchcraft. The voice in the pavilion was finally amazed and said sternly, "High priest, the consequences of what you do are bound to be intolerable to heaven and earth, not to be tolerated by Juyo, and your soul will be scattered and you will die." The high priest's face was expressionless, and the murderous intent on the blade in his hand was strong. It is our bounden duty to clear the way for future generations, to overcome thorns and thorns, even if our souls are scattered. This is witchcraft. Ah! The screams were endless, and he was scratching his flesh crazily, and little drops of blood overflowed from his pores, pouring into the vortex behind the high priest. Maydew, who was hiding in the corner, looked grey, obviously frightened by the scene in front of him. It suddenly occurred to me that when they went up the mountain, these Meow people had given them some plaster, saying it could prevent poisonous insects on the mountain. I disliked the pungent smell of the plaster, so I didn't apply it. Strangely, even after applying these ointments, some people were still bitten by poisonous insects on the road, and some even turned into blood due to poisonous insect bites. Now that I think about it, it's not an ointment at all. High priest, you are so vicious. When thinking of this, even a well-informed descendant of Mi's Huang like Maydew couldn't help but take a breath. Everything was just as he had guessed. From the moment they entered Xiangzi, this old lady had already plotted against them. This scheming was really chilling. As more and more blood gushes out from the bodies of these strangers, the blood balls behind the high priest become more and more vivid, forming a strange vortex. The vortex reveals a primitive evil energy that seems to come from the prehistoric times. That's witchcraft. Ever since your voodoo sect lost the shamanic heritage, I never thought that after so many years, we could still see such exquisite witchcraft. The figure from the pavilion finally came out, his red scales jingling as he moved around. With his movement, the entire Yin-Yang mountain seemed to be trembling. Let's go. Maydew's face turned pale. He knew that the next step would be a terrifying battle, and that if he stayed here as a little miscellaneous fish, he would definitely die. He was about to fly away for his life, but at this moment, Maydew suddenly noticed the goddess beside him. Senior brother said that this little girl is not a ghost, but a living person. Thinking of this, Maydew gritted his teeth and cursed in his heart, "Oh, bah, Maydew, Maydew, who gave you the heart of a bodhisattva?" Immediately, he meditated the May family's martial arts in his mind, and along with the breath of Maydew, he gradually poured into the plum blossom hairpin in his hand. The plum blossoms on the hairpin were crystal clear for a while, and secretly fragrant. A magical fluorescent light surged out from it and enveloped Maydew's body, making him disappear into the air silently. Holding the plum blossom hairpin in his hand, Maydew felt such a magical effect for the first time, and he couldn't help but yearn for the deeds of his ancestors. This plum blossom hairpin is indeed known as a divine weapon. Back then, our ancestor, Taoist Plum Blossom, relied on these 3 plum blossom hairpins to force his way into the city of Fushao, causing chaos in the underworld and shocking the king of hell. In the end, he even had to reach an agreement with the ancestor of Plum Blossom. Even Mai Huazhuang has the ability to make Mingqi notes. It is precisely because of the power given to Mai Hua Taoist by the top management of Mingtu after this big commotion. From then on, Plum Blossom Village truly stood tall in the world and established a sect. It's a pity that the unfilial descendant Maydew is not as capable as our ancestors and cannot save all our comrades, but if he can save a little girl, he will live up to the name of Plum Blossom. As soon as he thought of this, Maydew immediately rushed forward and flew to the side of the heavenly girl right under the eyes of the underworld king. Without saying a word, he grabbed the little girl who was at a loss and ran away. Not long after the two ran away, they heard a crashing sound behind them. Then a violent storm hit, pushing the two of them away. Looking back, I saw that the high priest and the ghost king had collided with each other. I saw the mountains and the ground cracking under their feet. An invisible aura spread from the soles of their feet like ripples dripping into the water. Everything in its path was reduced to ashes. Oh my God! Maydew's legs trembled with fear when he saw this. He knew very well that gods could not really come to the human world. The reason why the Ghost King could appear in front of them was precisely because this was Yin Yang Mountain. Although it is outside yin and yang, it is within the five elements. It is a place similar to a ghost market. If the two of them destroyed Yin Yang Mountain with this move, they would never even think about leaving in this life. Thinking of this, he picked up the goddess on the ground and clamped it on his elbow. At the same time, he took out a shining golden talisman from his pocket, spat on the talisman, and put it on his forehead. Tai Shang Lejun is as urgent as the law, 1,000 miles of divine journey, rush. After saying that, the golden light on the talisman shone, and for a moment, Meidu felt like there was a breeze under his feet, and his speed suddenly became astonishingly fast. Wait a minute. As soon as he rushed into the courtyard in front of Yin Yang Mountain, the goddess in his arms suddenly struggled to make Meidu stop. He lowered his head and looked at the goddess in his arms with a sad face and said, "Little ancestor, it is important to save your life at this time, so why don't you run away quickly?" "No. Your Majesty doesn't allow me to go down the mountain privately. Besides, there are 3,000 strange ghosts guarding the door at the foot of the mountain. You don't have a token and no one will clear the way for you. Going down the mountain with you is asking for death." Although Tianu is young, she is extremely smart and her words are well-founded. However, Meidu was unconvinced and said, "Your king may be killed by that old lady later. As for those strange ghosts under the mountain, it doesn't matter, your king can't even see me, and those white walkers are just a bunch of blind people." Meidu said this with full confidence. He held the plum blossom hairpin in his hand. Unless he was a great god, he would never be able to find traces of him. Seeing that it didn't make sense, the goddess could only say, "You can leave if you want, but you have to go to my room first and take something with you, and then I will go with you. Otherwise, when you come down the mountain, I will yell and kill you. The White Walkers are coming. Hey, you little girl will repay kindness with revenge. Believe it or not, I will throw you away and leave on my own." Meidu curled his lips and said that he was going to throw Tianu to the ground. Whoever wants to care about this naughty kid can do it. Unexpectedly, as soon as Tianu's feet touched the ground, she immediately turned around and left. At this time, Meidu felt a little embarrassed. After all, he was not very old, and his heart was still warm. He knew that the two people behind him would beat her harder and harder, and the aftermath would sweep here. An ordinary little girl left here would only die. She cursed in her heart, but she still followed her unconsciously. "There is no way, Holy Mother is Holy Mother, whoever makes me soft-hearted, I admit it." In fact, the goddess didn't go far, she went directly to a small room on the side, opened the door of the room, quickly climbed onto the table and chairs, and took off the painting on the wall. "I said you did it just for this painting." Meidu couldn't help complaining when he saw this, thinking it was some precious treasure. "This is the only thing the king has left for me, and it is also the only portrait of the two of us. If I leave, I will naturally take it with me." "Your Majesty." After hearing this, Meidu looked at the painting and saw a little girl sitting on a stone. The painting was lifelike, but after looking at it for a long time, he didn't see the Jui Ghost King. "Where is your king? Aren't you the only one here?" The girl rolled her eyes at him and pointed her finger, "Where are you looking? Isn't my king right here?" Meidu followed the girl's fingers and looked into the painting. He felt as if he was struck by lightning. He opened his mouth, wishing he could stuff a big duck egg into his mouth. This is the Jui Ghost King." "Yeah. That's right." The girl nodded and saw that the place her finger was pointing was the black cat lying in her arms. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 496. Hoo. At the top of the tower, the wind mixed with ice shavings hit my face. Strangely enough, As soon as I climbed to the top of the tower, the temperature here began to rise, and it was not as cold as below. The three of them stood on it and could see the entire Yin-Yang mountain from a distance. A ray of green light became more and more dazzling on the cliff of Yin-Yang mountain. The old woman started trying her best. It's ancient witchcraft. It's really surprising. But I'm afraid she won't survive. The coffin lid was opened a tiny gap, and one eye peered through the coffin lid silently at the ray of green light in the distance. Hey, we're here now, let the old man out. Gao Zhou knocked on the coffin and said. What's the rush? If I come out now, I'm no match for a great master. The guy in the coffin was extremely cunning. He knew that if he went out at this time, he would most likely be pinned to the ground by Su Tong and three others, so he refused to get out of the coffin easily. Su Tong looked at the glazed lamp in front of him. The lamp body was very small. It was said to be glazed, but in fact it was just wrapped in a layer of crystal on the outside. But if you look closely, you could see that there were two heads inside the crystal. Meow. The black cat in his arms looked at the lamp eagerly, as if what he saw in front of him was not a lamp but a piece of dried fish, exuding an irresistible temptation. Old guy, don't play this trick with me. The worst is, we'll both die. Even if I fight for half my life, I can pull you out with the blaster. Gao Zhou knocked on the coffin angrily. It was a great shame and humiliation for him, who belonged to a family of exorcists, to fall into the hands of a zombie one day. But the man in the coffin seemed determined and would not come out until the lamp was lit. This made Gao Zhou curse, but in his heart he had no temper at all. Okay, but you have to tell me first what it costs to light this lamp. Su Tong walked to the coffin and asked. He didn't believe that Zhu Yimingui King was so easy to talk to, he just asked them to light a lamp. And Su Tong reached out and pulled out the black cat from his arms, holding it in his hand and looking at it. I always feel that there is something wrong with this gadget. Meow. The black cat looked at Su Tong with an innocent expression, as if he wanted to tell him that he was also an innocent victim. But Su Tong held it and walked step by step to the edge of the tower, looking at the surging water below. If you don't tell me, I won't light the lamp. At worst, it will be regarded as our challenge failure. Anyway, there is no loss. Hearing this, the man in the coffin finally stopped being silent, and his voice suddenly turned cold. Boy, aren't you afraid that I will kill this old man? Go ahead and kill him. Su Tong picked up his fingers and teased the cat nonchalantly. After hearing Su Tong's words in the coffin, he didn't speak, as if he was waiting for Gao Zhou and Chang Wogu to hear anything. However, the two of them remained silent and had no intention of speaking. Life is very important, and neither of them wants to die, but just like the tacit understanding Su Tong reached with the old man at the beginning, whether it is passive or active, the premise of cooperation is that each other is restrained, so that the game can continue. If we let this guy lead us by the nose, the worst is possible and no one will be able to live well. After all, no one is so angry. If they were afraid of death, neither of them would be where they are today. The attitude of the three people surprised Wang Zhao in the coffin. After a moment of silence, he opened his mouth to explain to Su Tong. The king of underworld ghosts was actually exiled from the Yin Cao. The reason is unknown, but there is a great god behind him to protect him, so no one from the Yin Cao came to arrest him. During the battle that year, Qin Tianjian summoned the Yin Cao ghosts and gods with the emperor's list, but as a result, none of the Yin Cao gods were willing to come. Only a kid came to deliver the letter, and then we knew the reason. It was not that the people in Qintian prison were unable to kill him, but they just didn't dare. Wang Zhao talked about what happened that year. He was hiding in a corner and heard with his own ears the private discussions of the Qintian prison people. You can't kill them. If you kill the Jui underworld ghost king, they will inevitably be settled in the underworld after their death. But if he doesn't kill, he will be violating the emperor's order. The emperor's order cannot be violated. If he disobeys the order, his whole family will be buried with him. So they cut off the two heads of the Jui Ghost King and made this lamp. Only by lighting this lamp could the Ghost King leave here. The people in the Kintian prison were very clever in their calculations. As long as the Ghost King was not born, who knows whether they killed him or not, they could just go back and revive him. How can you keep such a big thing a secret? Gao Zhou asked from the side, feeling that this guy was talking nonsense and couldn't believe a single word of it easily. If there were so many alien masters back then, if one of them revealed the matter, Qin Tianjian and his gang would be doomed. Wang Zhao couldn't help but sneered when he heard this. Yes, so those who left with Qin Tianjian, I think there is a high probability that they will not appear in the world again from now on. Kill and silence. Gao Zhou's eyelids twitched, and he immediately felt relieved. Yes, such a big thing had never been spread in the world. He had never heard of it in the local area. He only found out about it after reading the contents on the Feng Shui map. It seems that killing people and silencing them will most likely not be possible. Su Tong interrupted Wang Zhao at this moment and continued, what I'm asking is, what is the cost of lighting it? If this lamp was better, King Jui Mingui would have lit it long ago, why wait until now? When Su Tong said this, Gao Zhou reacted immediately and kicked the coffin. Old thief, at this time, you are trying to change the subject for me. If you don't say anything, you can light the lamp yourself. There was a wry smile in the coffin. Knowing that there was no way around it, he could only say, there are 3 requirements for lighting the lamp. First, it must be a living person. It must be lit with its own true fire. This thing can only be found in living people. The so-called real fire is the 3 fires on the shoulders and the top of the head. Secondly, the time for lighting the lamp is very short. If you miss the time, you will have to wait for another 44 years, so this is the reason why you are limited to lighting the glass lamp within half an hour. Third, after the person who lit the lamp dies. At this point, the voice in the coffin became smaller and smaller. After death, the soul cannot enter the underworld, and the dead cannot transcend life. This price is actually very serious. After all, as long as you are a human being, you will eventually die. Even from another perspective, living is just the definition given by humans. Perhaps death does not necessarily mean disappearing, but can also be understood as temporarily offline. But if after death, the soul cannot enter the underworld, it can only wander around the world as a lonely ghost, being illuminated by the sun, blown by wind and rain, with no one to rely on. It will not take long for the soul to be in a state of confusion and eventually disappear completely. But this price is like this to others, but to Su Tong, it is like scratching an itch. Because of the characteristics of Bashan Cao, if I could find a successor, I would give all my money to teach Bashan Cao to him. Then, even if I die in the future, I can learn from my master and live in the virtual reality of the next successor. From then on, their family's lineage continued, repeated matryoshkas, and passed down from generation to generation. In the end, it became a part of the master's plan, gathering the strength of 10 generations to open the gate of heaven and ascend in the daytime. What if you don't want to be like your master? It doesn't matter, you can go to heaven and have fun. I heard that angels everywhere don't like to wear clothes, so you can be an excellent fashion designer. You can also go to Lilith's kitchen and taste her superb cooking skills that you will never forget. In short, it doesn't matter whether you go to the underworld or not. Real. Gao Zhou didn't believe it, it's so simple. Why should the high priest work so hard? Why don't you just light the lamp? How could King Jui Mingui tell this kind of thing to his enemies so easily? Besides, voodoo has a long history, and those weird witchcraft can be as evil as possible. This lantern was made from the head of the 9E underworld ghost king. If someone from the voodoo sect were to light the lantern, wouldn't that be like asking Monkey Son to go to the peach garden? Then how dare he let us light this lamp now? Gao Zhou continued to ask. But this question is no longer important, even Chang Wuji can figure it out. There is a big difference between being able to run and not being able to run. At present, the Jui Ghost King must have realized that there are no longer enough souls here to bring him, so he wants to change his passiveness into an active one. Anyway, if you light the glazed lamp, the Ghost King will be able to return the soul of Jiaxiao Mountain to you, and I will be able to get what I want. Everything will be happy. Seeing that Su Tong did not refuse directly, Wang Zhao urged him to light the lamp immediately. The time was almost up. However, Su Tong did not light the lamp, but slowly raised his hands and raised the black cat above his head. The most dangerous place is the safest place, right? The black cat was startled, and then his eyes tightened and his limbs suddenly felt a strong feeling of stepping into the air. It turned out that at this time, Su Tong suddenly let go of his hand and threw the cat directly into the tower. Aim! The black cat let out a sharp cry and quickly flew down the tower. But at this time, someone couldn't sit still. The lid of the coffin, which had always been closed, was suddenly pushed open. Then a black shadow jumped out of the coffin and jumped off the tower desperately. He held the black cat in the air tightly in his arms, and then grabbed the wall of the tower with his other hand. Sharp nails protruded from the dark palms, and they were inserted straight into the outer wall of the tower like cutting tofu. Kaka kaka. A crack extended down the tower, as eye-catching as a huge scar. You bastard! After confirming that the black cat in his arms was safe, Wang Zhao finally raised his head and revealed his true face. Even though he has turned into a zombie, it can still be seen that when Wang Zhao was young, he was quite handsome, with sharp edges and corners, and a plump heaven. Su Tong looked at Wang Zhao with a smile, waved to him, took out his mobile phone from the prop book, and looked at the time. Half an hour was left, and there were less than 3 minutes left. Since you also said that King Jui Mingui will never reveal his secret so easily, why should he believe that I will actually light the lamp? He is not afraid that I will steal the lamp. Hand it over to Voodoo. So the best explanation is that he will follow me personally. In 2 minutes, the king can return to his true form. If I don't light the glass lamp by then, you are not afraid of what I will do. The black cat narrowed his eyes and stared at Su Tong with an evil look. Wang Zhao even glared at Su Tong. I don't know how this guy came up with this. In fact, this guy Wang Zhao told lies a lot, but he was a clever liar, but he shouldn't have said this in front of Su Tong. Because Su Tong is better at telling lies than him. Everything Wang Zhao said was true. But he would deliberately omit some issues. For example, he said that during the divine sacrifice, the Ghost King would be very weak, but did not say how weak he was specifically. He said that he has been here for a long time. Since it has been so long, why can't he find a way to leave? What is his relationship with the Ghost King? Putting these hidden information together, the answer is already clear. Su Tong made a bold guess. This cat is the king of the ghost of Jui. Wang Zhao has taken refuge with him a long time ago, so he must follow him to protect the king of the ghost if something unexpected happens, or maybe he has other motives. Of course, this is all my own conjecture. But what does it matter if you guess wrong? Cats have 9 lives anyway, so they may not die if they fall. In the worst case, they can just pick them up. However, Wang Zhao was so eager to protect the Lord that he not only exposed the underworld king, but also lost the leverage to blackmail them. Gao Zhou and Chang Wuju hurriedly walked to the coffin and saw that the old man was already lying unconscious inside. The two took a closer look. After discovering that the old man was fine, he felt relieved. In order to ensure that everything was safe, Gao Zhou even gave the old man a Lingro blood revitalizing pill to eat. The two then closed the coffin again and walked to the edge aggressively. Wang Zhao had a few more silver needles on his fingers. Chang Wugu silently took out the screwdriver, squinting and thinking about it later. This guy opens a few eyes. There was still about a minute left. Let alone one cat in this time, even 10 more Wang Zhaos would not be enough for the two of them to kill. But Su Tong stopped the two of them, lowered his head and looked at the black cat in Wang Zhao's hand. Of course these are just a little joke with the king, I'm going to light the lamp right now. Head. Gao Zhou's expression changed and he looked at Su Tong in confusion, wondering why he had to light the glass lamp. But soon Gao Zhou remembered that the purpose of their trip was to rescue old Mrs. Gao's soul. If they really killed the Ghost King, how would they get this soul back? Thinking of this, Gao Zhou hesitated for a moment, then stretched out his hand to stop Su Tong. Boss. What if this guy doesn't keep his word? This is our family's business. I can't risk your life. Hearing the words behind him, Chang Wu couldn't help but curled his lips. Su Tong pushed Gao Zhou away, strode to the glass lamp, and summoned a wisp of hellfire on his fingertips. The firelight shone on Su Tong's face, making the expression on his face flicker. A smile appeared on Su Tong's face. That's even simpler. If he doesn't keep his word, just treat him to a fist fight. As he spoke, he saw Su Tong's fingertips gently pinch, and the weak real fire floated in the air, falling lightly on the wick covered with solid ice. Sorry, it's a little late. I finished writing a chapter. After reading it myself, I found that there were logical errors. I revised it for most of the day, and the more I revised it, the more chaotic it became. I simply deleted it and rewrote it, which was a waste of time. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 497. Boom. With waving knives and flashing figures, the two were fighting on the edge of the cliff. For a moment, they were like gods and demons. A whirlpool surged behind the high priest, and various strange spells broke through the air. These spells turned into ice, thunder, lightning, and flames, and were thrown out like a violent storm. It was a natural force that had not been refined or modified by magic. It had a primitive aura and was just overwhelming. The red shadows below flickered and moved, constantly changing figures from the cracks amid the indiscriminate bombardment. For a moment, I saw the red shadow flashing suddenly, turning into a strong wind. The next moment, it moved across the sky 100 meters away. I immediately looked outside. When I saw the faint silver light flashing on the water in the distance, the red shadow a ferocious smile gradually appeared on his face. You can't kill me, and I am not the king of Jui underworld ghost. The king will be here soon, and you will pay the price for your recklessness. The high priest's eyes were shining brightly. Faced with the shocking news revealed by the red-armored ghost king in front of him, he was not surprised. He just said lightly, I'm afraid he won't be able to come back. The high priest said, looking in the direction of the distant lighthouse, and flashed in his mind which year the three of them were on the top of Wulingyuan mountain. Shuigui, wearing a long Confucian gown, faced the mountains. Lao Gao, my mountain worship button is ready. Hey, isn't this a good thing? It's just like what you said. After 3 generations, your family will be able to branch out independently. At that time, you can learn from Plum Blossom Village to half hide and half retreat, and be free as gods. As Gao Xiaoshan spoke, he gently took up the slender hand beside him and put the other hand on her belly. But, in terms of fighting, I am not as good as you, but in terms of luck, I am still better than you. I think you should find a mother-in-law quickly, otherwise it will be difficult for you to find an apprentice in the future. Shuigui turned around and looked at the immortal couple in front of him with envy, but said with a slight regret, but I don't intend to pass on this mountain button. Spread? Why? Gao Xiaoshan's eyes widened. The mystery of worshipping the mountain buckle is no less than those passed down from ancient times in Longhu Mountain. Even once it is spread, it can be passed down from generation to generation like the 5 immortals in the northeast, and the incense will never end, even in the age of end of Dharma. Not afraid either. Lao Gao, this road is to climb on the shoulders of the apprentice. Shuigui lowered his head so that the two could not clearly see the expression on his face, but it was not difficult to tell from his tone that it was difficult for him to make up his mind on this path. The inheritance of other families is to hope that their disciples will climb up by stepping on their shoulders. My own path is the opposite. It will inevitably make people feel ashamed if they step on their disciples' shoulders and climb up. This. Gao Xiaoshan was speechless for a moment. He knew very well the special nature of the Beishinko technique. Unless. At this time, Shuigui raised his head and his expression gradually became firm. Unless this successor has a chance to break the shackles, I will never teach it to him. When Gao Xiaoshan heard this, he couldn't help slapping his forehead and grinning. It's too early to lift the lid, aren't you? How can such a good thing happen to you in the world? Those bald-ass Taoist priests from the three religions are all Besa? Is there really such a good seed, can they keep it for you? I see you, it is better to find a wife to have a baby, and it is more reliable to teach you Beishinko. Nowadays, it is not all about science. Genetics is also a science. If you are not required to work hard to give birth to a dozen babies, there will still be something inside. A few are talented. Humph, my brother and sister are here, just be a witness. If one day I can see someone using the mountain buckle again, then this kid will definitely be able to surpass me. Why? Just because you can fight. Hey. Shuigui grinned, just because I am Shuigui. Memories flashed by, and the high priest squinted at the tower in the distance. Brother Shui, let me witness the power of Shankao. When he thought of this, the high priest's eyes suddenly became sharp. He turned back to look at the red-armored Ghost King, waved the sword in his hand, and his own destiny appeared above his head. A golden-headed centipede appeared on the top of the high priest's head. The strange thing is that there are 4 pairs of cicada-like wings behind the centipede, which tremble its body and make a harsh buzzing sound. Immediately afterwards, the high priest raised his knife and cut off the centipede's head, and bits of golden blood sprinkled on her body like rain and dew. The red-armored Ghost King frowned. Old ladies, you even sacrifice your own life, you are crazy. There are no tigers or monkeys in the mountain who are called kings. If this yin-yang mountain is not destroyed, I don't know how many kings will occupy the mountain and become kings in the future. You. Are you going to? The red-armored Ghost King had a look of disbelief on his face, thinking that this old woman had completely lost her mind and gone crazy. I saw the high priest's face as usual. She had been ashamed of her husband and her children in her whole life. Only her own clan and her grandson could no longer be ashamed. The knife in his hand was slowly raised above his head, and the high priest recited a strange convoluted spell, and his body ignited with golden light. The red-armored Ghost King seemed to have noticed something. He raised his head with a horrified expression, only to see abnormal and rapid fluctuations in the vitality of the heaven and earth above his head, and a huge energy that enveloped 100 feet in radius crashed down. Madman! The red-armored king was trembling in his heart. This old woman actually wanted to destroy Yin-Yang Mountain by herself. He immediately turned around and turned into a black light and was about to run away, but at this moment, an embroidered shoe shot out of the air. The shoe slipped in a strange trajectory in mid-air and hit the Hong family king squarely in the face. I don't know the origin of these shoes. The red-armored king suddenly felt dizzy and fell to the ground. As soon as the shoe hit the target, it immediately disappeared without a trace. The high priest followed the direction in which the shoes disappeared and vaguely saw a woman wearing meow clothes, who gradually disappeared from his sight. Although she didn't know who the opponent was, she could easily knock the red-armored king to the ground. Such strength was definitely not inferior to hers. It's just, I have never seen who the other party is. After thinking for a moment, the high priest stopped thinking. He raised the blade in his hand above his head and aimed at the red-armored Ghost King with all his strength to strike it down. Creation of heaven and earth. Rumble. Accompanied by a huge cracking sound, a huge crack was split open in Yin Yang Mountain. The crack reached deep into Yin Yang Mountain and was about to split the entire mountain in half. My dear. These old ladies are so powerful, they really split the mountain. On the high tower, Gao Zhou stared dumbfoundedly at the cracked Yin Yang Mountain in the distance. He saw that as the mountains were torn apart, the mountains on both sides were split into two, and the crack in the middle was getting bigger and bigger. And in the cracks, there is a vortex somewhere, and I don't know where the vortex is going. Such a terrifying power is truly terrifying. Snort. At this time, a cold snort came from behind the three of them, and Wang Zhao was seen climbing up from the tower. The black cat was squatting on his shoulder, staring down at the three of them. Congratulations, Your Majesty. Your Majesty has regained your freedom. From now on, you can go anywhere in the world. Then, Gao Xiaoshan's soul, please leave it to us, Your Majesty. Su Tong stepped forward with a smile. Ken. The black cat's two pairs of beast eyes stared at Su Tong's face, and the slender tail behind him swayed in the air as if it had escaped gravity. The tail was swept lightly, and 2 dots of soul light were seen floating out of the tail. Seeing this, Gao Zhou hurriedly stepped forward, pinched his fingers, and drew a blood mark on his fingertips, then dripped blood into the air. As if summoned by the breath connected by blood, 2 points of soul light immediately wrapped the blood. That's right, it's my grandfather's soul. Gao Zhou felt relieved when he saw this. Su Tong took out a small crystal soul coffin pendant from under his neck, opened the coffin lid, and collected the 2 points of soul light inside. This small soul coffin was given to him by Ji Feiyu from the ghost market, but he didn't expect it to be useful. After Su Tong handed the soul coffin to Gao Zhou, he slowly raised his hands. Your Majesty, you are indeed true to your word. In this case, we will not disturb you and leave. The black cat swung its tail and watched Su Tong bow down to him. Finally, he couldn't help but poke his sharp nails out of his claws and scratch Su Tong's head. You'd better stay. The furry little black claws were urgent and fast, but Su Tong's hand was also bowing forward at this moment. It's better for the king to come in. The two of them obviously had no intention of letting each other leave from the beginning, and actually chose to take action at the same time. It's just that Su Tong's mountain buckle was obviously prepared. In an instant, the furry claws did not tear Su Tong's head apart as it expected. Instead, the world in front of him suddenly changed drastically. Looking at it, the pavilions in front of you are intertwined with each other. It looks prosperous, but it is also decadent and desolate. The figures of Su Tong and the others were stretched infinitely in an instant. Huh. Black Cat looked at the changes around him with some surprise. It seems that the 2 guys who broke into my mountain gate back then are really the elders of your family. The black cat jumped off Wang Zhao's shoulder, and before it even hit the ground, it transformed into a young man with a human-like appearance. The young man has very long hair and a cat's long whiskers on his angular face. Who would have thought that this old ghost who has occupied Yin Yang Mountain for so many years would actually look a little bit cute? He looked around curiously. It's not wrong. Although the form is different, the spirit is still there. Back then, these 2 little guys almost overturned my Yin Yang Mountain. The Ghost King remembered that a long time ago, 2 people broke in. One of them used a very strange spell, which made him suffer. Now that I think about it, it feels like a lifetime ago. I couldn't keep the elder of your family back then, so it would be good to keep his descendants. The beast-like eyes of the 9E Underworld Ghost King stared straight at Su Tong's heart. He couldn't help but swallow. That heart was the source of darkness. How could a mortal have such a treasure? Hee, it's just you. You have a backing. You're amazing. We have one too. Gao Zhou raised his head and walked forward. He had his master in charge, but he was still afraid of this mere brat. After saying that, he did not forget to stare at Wang Zhao aside with provocative eyes, "And you, don't let me catch you, or I will cut you into pieces." The frustration along the way almost drove Gao Zhou crazy. Since he broke his skin so quickly, he wanted to vent his bad energy properly. Chang Wuhen didn't speak, but silently carried the coffin. After taking 2 steps back, a strange short knife appeared in his hand, and his eyes glanced back and forth at Su Tong and King Ningui. Su Tong raised his hands and bowed down to the 9E Underworld King in front of him. However, strangely, the black door behind him slowly opened. Su Tong waited for a while, but there was no movement at all. He couldn't help but turn around in confusion, and saw that there was no master or trace of Taoist Sun Long in the empty gate. It was just pitch black and nothing could be seen. The next chapter is almost finished and will be posted later. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 498. How could this happen? Gao Zhou was startled. He stuck his head into the door and took a look, but saw that there was really no shadow in the huge hall. "This, Master, Master, that, are you here?" Gao Zhou tried to shout twice, but there was no response at all. For a moment, Gao Zhou's face fell. He leaned into Su Tong's ear and said, Master, didn't you go to the toilet?" Su Tong rolled his eyes and looked back at the door behind him. He saw that the sky above the throne was empty, and he really didn't see his master. Hey. The Ghost King showed his sharp teeth at the corner of his mouth. "I know you can summon the gods of Yin Cao and Yama, right, but your parents must have never told you that this trick is useless to me. If you don't believe me, just give it a try. Yin Cao Shisue, Yama of the 10th Palace, who dares to touch me?" If the gods in the underworld dared to interfere with his affairs, then he wouldn't have been dominating them for so many years. Even if he messes up yin and yang, so what? Who dares to control it? Who can control it? Even if he caused such a big turmoil back then, the big thing was reduced to a trivial matter in the end. A sentence of being expelled from the underworld for 1,000 years was simply a clear punishment and a hidden reward. Su Tong put down his hands and stared at the Ghost King in front of him intently. "If you say so, I really want to give it a try. So what if I touch you? In the end, you are just a dead cat." The Ghost King's face condensed, and the hair on his body exploded. In one leap, he broke through the barrier between Su Tong's reality and reality, and came to Su Tong's side in an instant, grabbing Su Tong's heart with his sharp claws. When Su Tong saw this, the fire of hell exploded in his hands. The fire exploded in Su Tong's palm, forming a terrifying fire dragon that instantly swallowed the Ghost King. "Is this all you can do?" The black hair danced in the sea of fire, and layers of black halo appeared behind the Ghost King. Thousands of skeletons emerged after each round of halo. Every time he turned, wisps of grey divine light burst out from the body of the 9E Underworld Ghost King in front of him. Su Tong's hellfire disappeared silently under the divine radiance. It is completely different from the phantom of the 5 gods on Buman Mountain in the script world. He is a real god. Time has long passed and his divine power has begun to recover. This is his dojo, and he is also the only god here. In front of the gods, the power of mortals is insignificant after all. Even if this person is a great master, so what? He is just an ant. Su Tong's face changed drastically. He pushed Gao Zhou away, and shouted to Chang Liuji behind him, "Run!" After saying to run quickly, Su Tong rushed towards the sea of fire in front of him. "Act recklessly." Wang Zhao stood behind and shook his head. "What about the great master? This is Yin Yang Mountain. In front of a real god, any great master is just a ridiculous little ant. Even those who have achieved enlightenment with the 3 flowers gathering at the top do not dare to compete with the gods before reaching perfection." However, what surprised everyone was that Su Tong suddenly took out an object and threw it towards the Underworld King. The thing was shining with golden light, as ethereal as a cloud of smoke. As Su Tong waved his fist, this golden light point ignored the divine brilliance around King Nether Ghost and exploded in front of King Nether Ghost. Boom! The Ghost King's body was shaken violently, and he was unable to move as if struck by lightning. Then he could only watch Su Tong's fist hit his face hard in the golden smoke. "I've just touched you, what can you do?" When the fiery fist, wrapped in the smell of sandalwood, hit the Ghost King's face, the Ghost King felt as if his head had been hit by a sledgehammer. This scene caught everyone, including the Underworld King, off guard. In an instant, the Ghost King recognized it. It was the merit of incense, an offering for worshipping the gods in the world, and also the source of the gods. Where does this guy get the merit of incense? He keeps devouring living souls precisely because he does not have the merits of incense to sustain him. If he wants to stay in the human world for a long time and ensure that his divine status is not shaken, he must rely on the power of living souls to replace the merits of incense. However, how could this kid have something that he didn't even have? Fortunately, the power of the incense merit has begun to dissipate. After all, this merit cannot suppress him for too long. But what everyone didn't expect was that a cloud of golden smoke appeared in Su Tong's hand again. This time there were more than the last time, tens of thousands of them. Now the Ghost King's face turned green, tens of thousands of merits? You dare! Bang! I saw the incense merit igniting in Su Tong's hand, turning into a huge incense palm and slapping the Ghost King's face again. This slap caused Dabby Do to fall to the ground, with half of his face covered in blood. Now Wang Zhao was dumbfounded. Good guy, I have lived for so long, and I have never seen a mortal fight a god so cleanly. But when he saw that the golden thing in Su Tong's hand was actually the merit of incense, he was relieved. It was like smashing it with the merit of incense. And it's 100,000 merit points at a time. This isn't a fight, it's just burning money. How dare you hit me? The Ghost King's eyes widened. Except for the time in the Jiajing year, he had never been so offended before. What's even more outrageous was that the person who hit him turned out to be a little great master. If you don't fight, you won't be successful. Su Tong had a cold face. Hey! The huge incense palm grasped the throat of the Underworld King, followed by another fist made of incense merit, aimed at the Underworld King's head and hit it. Suddenly, the body of the Underworld King vibrated with a shrill sound, and the divine ring behind him was shattered. The Ghost King probably never dreamed that he would be beaten by such a wealthy man in his life. Su Tong let go of his hands, and as if the incense merit was free of charge, he aimed at the Ghost King and hit him hard on the head. For a moment, my body was like a sandbag, being beaten so hard that I couldn't even stand still. He has the ability to kill Su Tong with one strike. But now he couldn't even move a finger. All he could do was watch helplessly as Su Tong hit his own face with incense merit one after another. While smashing, Su Tong could still be heard scolding, "I told you to pretend to be cute, I told you to be handsome, I told you to pretend to be 13 in front of me." Wang Zhao on the side was stunned and felt his mouth tightening. After a moment of recovery, he planned to run away. When you encounter such a demon king, what are you doing here if you don't run away? However, as soon as Wang Zhao thought about it, he heard a sound of breaking wind behind him, and then he saw Gao Zhou with a black face, like a runaway vicious dog, with black corpse spots all over his face, pointing directly at him. Pounce! Old thief, don't leave! Gao Zhou, who was so angry that he had nowhere to vent his anger, rushed over after transforming into a corpse. When he stretched out his hand, he saw the Buddha's light shining all over him. Wang Zhao was so frightened that he almost lost his soul. How could he still be glowing with the Buddha's light after half a step as a master zombie? Gao Zhou rushed forward very fast and slapped him in the face. Wang Zhao quickly blocked it with both hands. Although he was a zombie, he was not an ordinary zombie. Not only did he retain the memories of his life, but he also retained his martial arts attainments. Immediately he raised his hands, braced his legs, and used a white elephant tower move to block Gao Zhou's sharp claws. He was about to follow up with a move from the immortal to guide the way. The monkey reached for the stars, intending to strike first and remove Gao Zhou's claws and eyeball. However, the abacus was calculated well, but he suddenly felt a cold air coming from behind him, and looked back. I saw this guy. Chang Liuzhu unexpectedly appeared behind him. What frightened Gao Zhou even more was that this guy was holding a shiny silver object in his hand. It looked like a dagger, but not like it. It was straight and round, with a red handle on the back. Hey hey! Chang Wuhen showed a sinister smile in his eyes, aimed his gaze at Wang Zhao's round butt, and swung the screwdriver in his hand with all his strength, and the speed of his hand was so fast that the after-image appeared. Poof! 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 With the intense shaking, Wang Zhao, even a zombie, couldn't stand such an unrestrained and high-intensity attack speed, and his butt was instantly stabbed with bloody holes everywhere. Now Wang Zhao was surrounded by enemies from both sides and acted as a man on both sides. He had no power to resist at all, and was pinned to the ground and rubbed for minutes. Fortunately, he was not the only one who was pressed to the ground and rubbed. The Ghost King was also pressed to the ground with a blaster. He originally had a handsome face, but he was so beaten that he was afraid that his parents would not even recognize him when they came. There were 3 guys in front of the hall. They were shouting at the headmaster to beat him, but their hearts were bleeding. After all, what they hid was their food rations. Enough. At this time, a hand landed lightly on Su Tong's shoulder. Su Tong was startled and looked up to see Shuigui. Shuigui looked at him with a smile. Stop fighting. If you fight again, you will really be beaten to death. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shuigan Xiao. Chapter 499. Su Tong looked at his master, then at the Ghost King who was beaten to a bloody pulp with his divine ring shattered on the ground, and slowly put away the incense of merit in his hand. He coughed slightly and defended, "Who hit him? I just think he is too ugly and I want to help him have plastic surgery." Shuigui waved his hand and saw a reluctant Taoist Sunlong coming out of the gate carrying a bundle of iron chains. He raised his foot and kicked the Ghost King. "You're lucky." As he said this, he put the chain on the Ghost King and dragged him into the gate like a dead dog. "Master, you are not interesting enough this time." Seeing the Underworld King being dragged into the gate like this, Su Tong showed a look of aggrievedness, brought out a small stool for the master to sit down first, then hugged the master's thighs and gently rubbed the master's legs. "You always have to fight. Now I'm helping you. What should you do if you encounter someone I can't fight in the future?" Shuigui asked with a smile. "Then just run. Can't run away? Then join. You can also become a wife." Su Tong didn't forget to take out the mirror and look at it. Facing Su Tong's weird answer, the master was not angry, but said meaningfully, "But you always have something you want to protect." Su Tong's eyes in the mirror flickered for a few times, then he slowly put down the mirror in his hand. "From now on, I will just recycle it and provide you with some logistics, and you can do the rest yourself," Master Shuigui said, patting his shoulder gently. Then I can't learn my Shankao in vain, right? You, the old worshipper of Shankao, can knock on the gate of the King of Hell, but I, the worshipper of Shankao, can knock on the door of the King of Hell? That's your business, not mine. Don't always tie yourself to the framework I created. Otherwise, when will it become a reality? If you have the ability, don't knock on my door. Think of other ways." Faced with his master acting like a rogue, Su Tong really had no temper at all. "Let me go. You stupid pigs, I am the king of the 9 evil underworld ghosts, you dare to arrest me. At this time, the Ghost King, who had been dragged into the Master's hall, had woken up from his coma. After realizing that he was not dead, he immediately started yelling. Okay, let's start working again. The Master patted his thigh and stood up and walked into the door. Jingle bell. At this time, Taoist Sunlong lifted him up from behind and kicked him in the calf. The Ghost King fell to his knees involuntarily, and then Taoist Sunlong held his head down and smashed it against the hard floor tiles. Kowtow! How could the Ghost King accept this? The shouts and curses became even more constant. The Master sat down on the dragon chair, his expression gradually becoming serious. King of the underworld ghosts. You used to commit misdeeds in the underworld and were sentenced to be exiled to the Yang world for 1,000 years. I didn't expect that you still showed no repentance. You took Yin Yang Mountain by force, reversed Yin and Yang, and you were so audacious that you tried to stand on your own. This is a heinous crime. I will send you to death. Tower. But when King Ju Mingui heard it, he felt as if he was hearing a joke. A stern sneer came out of his mouth. He didn't know which Yin god was coming, but if he wanted to send him back to the Yin Cao, he would even have to send himself to the soul-breaking platform. Isn't this a joke? I think you are an idiot, and you sent me to the soul-breaking platform. Do you know who my master is? It will scare you out of your wits. As soon as Ju Mingui King said these words, he was replaced by a light voice, roar in the court, open your mouth for 30. Ah! How dare you hit me? As soon as the Ghost King stared, he felt someone grabbed his hair from behind and forced his face up. He saw an old Taoist coming towards him carrying a board. The king of underworld ghosts looked at the willow board used to fight ghosts in the old Taoist's hand, his eyes turned green. Old man, you dare to hit me? Dare you? Taoist Sunlong narrowed his eyes, picked up the paddle in his hand, aimed it at the Ghost King's face, and struck it down. Pop, pop, pop. The sound was light and crisp. This was no different from beating with human hands, but with a wooden plank made of willow wood. Su Tong's face was bruised and bloody, and even more flesh and blood splattered for a moment. No matter what kind of god you are, if you fall into the palace of the King of Hell, any divine power will be suppressed. The underworld king was beaten so hard that stars appeared in his eyes, and his mind was filled with 2 words, revenge. When I go back, my master will definitely come to rescue me. When my master rescues me, I will definitely let him send you and that little guy outside to the 18 hells. Wait, just wait for me. However, a voice immediately shattered his illusion. King Ghost, I know who is behind you, but he can't save you. The Ghost King raised his head, squinting his hazy eyes and gradually focusing, then his eyes suddenly widened. It's you. Suddenly a bad premonition flooded into the mind of the underworld king. How could it be you? Isn't the old guy in front of me the kid who was making trouble in his dojo with Gao Xiaoshan? Why is this old guy here? Why did he dare to wear this imperial robe? Who is he that dares to wear these clothes? In horror, the Ghost King's mind began to spin rapidly. The master narrowed his eyelids and his eyes gradually became sharper. Of course it's me. As the master said, he took out the Ghost Emperor's document and showed it to the King of Ghosts. At the same time, he said seriously, according to the order of the Ghost Emperor of the South, I am the Special Inspector of Yin Cao to supervise the ghosts of Yin and Yang and eliminate all evil spirits. Southern Ghost Emperor? Du Ziren. The Ghost King's heart skipped a beat, and he felt even more frightened. There are 5 Ghost Emperors, but that does not mean that there are only 5 Ghost Emperors. On the contrary, there are 2 Ghost Emperors in each side to check and balance each other. The only Southern Ghost Emperor, Du Ziren, holds all the power. It can be said that he is the most domineering and unreasonable among the 5 Ghost Emperors. Even if his master goes to intercede in person, Yu Desiren's temperament may not allow him to agree. His only hope now is to be escorted back to the Yin Cao. As long as he enters the Yin Cao, his master will definitely come to save him. However, Master Shuegui's next words completely shattered the thoughts in the Ghost King's mind. The Southern Ghost Emperor ordered me to give me the Emperor's robe and the right to facilitate my journey before I left. He also ordered me to give me a dragon bird to break the divine gate. Lord Ghost King, you can go on your journey with peace of mind. I saw the mountain ghost lifting a knife from one side. The knife doesn't look big, but its weight is astonishing. The mountain ghost's huge body requires both hands to pull the knife forward. There is a red-eyed dragon bird lying on the broad spine of the knife, with its teeth and claws spread out, choosing to devour anyone. No. If you dare to kill me, my master will not let you go. The Ghost King's face turned extremely ugly for a moment, and he screamed at Master Shuegui. Master Shuegui's face was expressionless, like a clay Buddha. I will send your cat head back to your master to see him for the last time and execute him. Let's hit the road. Taoist Sun Long took the King of Hell Ghosts and threw his head under the knife. No matter how much the Ghost King begged, it was of no avail. The moment the broadsword fell, Dragon Bird's eyes burst out with a ray of red light, and the huge head of the Underworld King was immediately chopped off. Taoist Sun Long found a box from nowhere, threw King Ninggui's head into it, and placed it on Shuegui's desk. What a waste! Su Tong stood at the door and watched. He could see clearly that when the dragon bird knife fell, it not only cut off the head of King Ningui, but also chopped it into pieces together with King Ninggui's divine ring. From now on, I'm afraid there will be no such character as the Ghost King in this world. But he still felt it was a waste. If he threw this into his immortal furnace, he didn't know what magic elixir he would be able to refine. As if he had read Su Tong's thoughts, the master smiled and patted the box holding the head of the Underworld King on the table. Silly boy, I can kill some people, but you can't, but you are indispensable for your benefit. I will take you down and I will naturally reward you. Hey, master, if you say this, I won't be sleepy. When Su Tong heard the reward, his eyes couldn't help but shine. The master raised his head and looked into the distance, then stepped down from the dragon chair and walked out of the door. There is no rush in this matter. You can come back to me in 3 days. The maid's craftsmanship has been pretty good recently. Our grandson and grandson are slowly drinking wine chat. As he said this, the master actually walked out of Su Tong's void, and his figure stepped on the void and headed straight for Yin Yang Mountain, as if he was rushing to see someone. Hey, where are you going, master? Gao Zhou and Chang Wuhan walked over and couldn't help but ask when they saw the master leaving. Su Tong shook his head and didn't know what the master was planning to do. Looking again, they found that the two of them had already taken care of Wang Zhao. This guy's butt was full of bloody holes and had been smashed to pieces. It was simply too miserable to look at. Su Tong glanced at the screwdriver Chang Wuhan was wiping and frowned. When did this thing become so strong? Chang Wuhan just concentrated on wiping the screwdriver on his hand, for fear of leaving a trace of blood on it. Hearing this, he simply wrote lightly, I spent 300 script points to enchant and reinforce it. Chang Wuju wiped the screwdriver on his hand as if it was his lifeblood. Head. Gao Zhou pulled Su Tong aside. This guy seems to have the ability to teleport through space. Let's be careful not to be attacked by this kid that day. Gao Zhou couldn't help but feel a chill when he thought of the scene of Chang Wuhan taking action. It would be fine if this guy didn't take action. Once he does, it's like he's possessed by Teddy. Coupled with the ability of the space system, it's almost impossible to guard against. Hey, don't worry. Su Tong patted Gao Zhou to express his relief. If Chang Wugu hadn't been restrained by the old man's affairs, he would have pounced on him like a mad dog. But I know this guy too well, and there are many ways to slowly tame him. Let's go, before the old man wakes up. Let's leave here in a hurry. Su Tong urged them, and before leaving, Su Tong did not forget to take back the soul lanterns made from the other two heads of the Ghost King. This was made from the other two heads of the Ghost King. It was still shining with grey light at this moment. After throwing it into the prop book, Messenger Su Tong found that this thing still needed to be appraised. But it can be imagined that this thing is definitely a good thing. Take it back and study it carefully. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 500. After the three people turned back along the road, they saw that Yin Yang Mountain had been split into two halves. The mountain, which was more than 100 meters tall, was divided into two. Under the mountain, a huge vortex was spinning, as if it was about to suck everything in. It's as terrifying as smashing them together. Good boy, this power. Gao Zhou stood on the split mountain peak and took a look. He couldn't help but be speechless. Even for a person like Su Tong, who is a certified player, wanting to split a mountain more than 100 meters in height with one knife would probably be just a dream. Su Tong looked around and saw his master standing on the edge of the broken mountain peak. He stepped forward and said, "Master, where is the high priest?" Judging from the situation on the battlefield, it was naturally the high priest who won, but Su Tong did not see any trace of her here. Master Shuigui looked back at Gao Zhou, who was not far away, and said calmly, "I'm going back. You guys should go back too, it's time for our family's karma to be paid off." Su Tong didn't know which aspect of cause and effect the master was referring to, whether he was referring to the Gao family or Jianghu, but when the master reminded him, Su Tong only thought of three words, Feng Lai Lu. It's time to go to Feng Lai Lu to settle the account. Shuigui also seemed to see the gloom flowing in Su Tong's eyes, and walked to Su Tong, "Don't kill him, just demolish the building. It's not cost-effective to fight a mad dog." Su Tong knew that the master was reminding him not to push the person in Feng Lai building to a dead end. That old guy Xiu Shikao Chan. After so many years, if he really pushed someone to a dead end and tried to bite him, it would be wrong. A big problem. Good. Su Tong knew this well and nodded to express his understanding. Shuigui didn't seem to be in a good mood. After seeing Su Tong understand what he meant, he gradually disappeared in front of him. The three of them did not stay here longer and returned along the original path. When they reached the neighborhood, a sudden chill hit them. When they looked back, they had already walked out of the arched doorway. Looking through the arch, they saw that most of the houses carved out of stone behind them had collapsed. The rest of the road was already a familiar one. It took the three of them an hour to walk out from the Blackwater pool with the big red coffin. As soon as I walked out, I saw the corpses of 5 or 6 people lying strewn outside the door. After these people got the treasure in Fangxi, they did not choose to follow them to Yin Yang Mountain. Instead, they had to retreat bravely and get the treasure before leaving. As for whether the soul will fall into the netherworld after death or wander away from the human world, it is too far away to think about. But what they didn't expect was that they would be assassinated as soon as they stepped out. The goal is precisely for the treasures in their hands. After a fight, some people will be injured and some will gain. The corpses left on the ground were once again swept into the depths of the water by the slender hair below when the water level rose again. At this time, Su Tong suddenly felt something. He looked back and saw the clear blue waves under the pool, but Su Tong could vaguely see a vague shadow hiding in the corner, looking towards him. But soon disappeared. It should be the so-called water god. What's wrong? Gao Zhou couldn't help asking when he saw Su Tong turning around. It's okay, let's talk about it later. Su Tong didn't even explain, and walked ahead to clear the way. He couldn't help but wonder what happened to this kid Meidu. But, this kid is very sneaky, plus he has 3 plum blossom hairpins in his hand and his identity as the heir of Plum Blossom Village, there is no place he can't go in and out of the world. Su Tong couldn't help but think of another person, where did his cheap wife go? So I pinched my fingers and calculated in my mind, and the result was that the person had already moved away to a foreign country. She can run fast. I'm afraid even the master himself can't tell the origin of his wife, and he doesn't know why she came here inexplicably this time. When the three of them came down from Black Wind Mountain, they found a place and opened the coffin. I saw the old man lying inside, still sleeping soundly. Yin Yang Cave Line. The Ghost King was beheaded by the master, and the Yin Yang Mountain was split open by the high priest. The two of them also obtained the soul of Gao Xiaoshan, which can be said to be a complete achievement. It's just that, Gao Zhou and Chang Wogu still need to trouble the old man to remove the poison from them. Otherwise, the old man would have burped that day, and the two of them would have been buried with him. What should we do? What if this old guy wakes up and doesn't cure the poison for us? Gao Zhou couldn't help but feel a little confused when he looked at the sleeping old man. In fact, Gao Zhou had no ill intentions towards the old man. On the contrary, he felt that the old man was quite pitiful along the way. He had endured so many years and collected so many treasures, but he didn't want to end up sleeping all the way without even seeing the scenery of Yin Yang Mountain. On the side, Chang Liuzu had a dark face and was playing with a screwdriver with one hand. He was thinking that if the old man wakes up later, if he doesn't remove the poison from his body, he will open a few eyes in his butt. Su Tong dragged his chin and was thinking about how to get the old man to remove the poison from his body. When the three of them noticed something at the same time, they all looked up. I saw a drone overhead flying slowly towards the side. Even though they were far apart, the three of them could still clearly see the words Blue Sky printed on the drone. It's the search team. When Gao Zhou saw this, he suddenly had a bitter look on his face. Unlucky, why are these search team members still here, and why did they find such a remote place? Chang Wogu picked up a stone and planned to smash the drone down, but at this time he was stopped by Su Tong. Su Tong looked back at the old man in the coffin and suddenly laughed. Don't worry, I have an idea. Early the next morning, when the sky was still dark and bright, Su Tong stretched and walked out of the door of the village neighborhood committee. Gao Zhou and Chang Wuzi looked unhappy for a moment. It seemed that he was thinking of the bugs he had just vomited out. Anyone who saw them would probably feel very uncomfortable. I'm really sorry. Don't worry. On behalf of the village, I assure you that we will handle this matter seriously. The director of the village committee walked out with him. Although he was the village director, he was much younger than Su Tong had imagined. He was only 35 or 6 years old. He wore black-framed glasses and looked like a recent graduate. Like a recent college student, he was quiet and delicate. But who would have thought that it was this village head who scolded the old man so badly that he didn't even dare to fart? He blushed and apologized to Su Tong and the others, and took out a toad skin. Tear off the cracked skin and grind it into powder, then drink it with cold water for Gao Zhou and Chang Wuhen. After the two drank, they vomited on the spot. Black bugs came out of their mouths, each one big and fat. It turned out that after Su Tong saw the drone, he suddenly remembered the old man's words when being interviewed by reporters and asked whether he could fly poison. The village director will not allow it to be used. If you use it, you will be scolded. Talk. Although the old man seemed to be joking, Su Tong took it to heart. He held Su Tong's hand apologetically and said. After saying that, the village director turned around and said, "What are you still doing? Come over and apologize to me." The old man was squatting in the corner. Hearing these words, he could only step forward with a blushing face. The old man, who was already full of white hair, looked more like a child who had done something wrong with his shy and blushing posture. As if being led by parents to apologize. "I'm sorry. I was wrong." The old man bowed deeply to the three of them. When Gao Zhou and Chang Wuji saw his funny posture, most of the bad breath in their hearts disappeared. According to the temperaments of Chang Wogu and Gao Zhou, it would be strange for the old man to mess with them like this and not give the old man some color. However, after the village director's scolding last night, and now they are in such a mess, the two of them I felt much better immediately. Thanks to you this time, otherwise this old man would have gone into the mountains by himself and would have frozen to death in the mountains overnight. On behalf of the village committee, I would like to thank you. Later, the village will prepare a table of wine and food for you to calm your shock. Although the village director is young, he is extremely experienced in dealing with things. Seeing that the three of them were no longer angry, he immediately changed his tone and began to thank them. Su Tong was not very interested in eating. He looked up and down at the village director in front of him, secretly amazed in his heart. To be honest, this village director is really very different from what I imagined. In his imagination, the village director who can sit here and make the Miao people who know the art of witchcraft obedient must be an old man of a certain age, holding a dry pipe in his hand, and with a pair of sharp eyes. Even this village director, he may be an expert in the art of witchcraft. But the result was so different from what I thought. Not only was the other party very young, he was not even from the Miao ethnic group, but it was incredible that such a person could manage the old man obediently. I believe that apart from the old man, the same is true for everyone else in the village. It was not just Su Tong who was also puzzled by this question. Gao Zhou also shamelessly stepped forward and asked in a low voice in the village director's ear, "Director, why are you so afraid of you? Aren't you afraid that they will trick you?" Hearing this, the village director lifted the glasses frame on the bridge of his nose with his fingers, patted Gao Zhou's arm meaningfully, and looked at the asphalt road in front of him. He was only in his early 30s, and his face already had deep wrinkles. But his eyes are still firm and lively. After I graduated from college, I was sent to work on poverty alleviation when I first arrived in the village. Just like you thought, I wanted to run away in the middle of the night. But seeing that the children here didn't even have a decent classroom, I felt I had to stay here. You see, now every family has meat to eat, new schools and kindergartens have been built in the village, the children have learned new knowledge, and the villagers' money bags are bulging. Who is going to do those stinky things? Follow nature and respond to people, this is how to solve problems. At the end of the sentence, the village director's face was filled with pride, the kind of confidence that came from his bones, and even the luck on his head turned red.